You are now listening to the Purple Fox Podcast.
Update.
What's going on, everybody? This is Kevin Cieze, your host of the Purple Fox Podcast. And today I wanted to highlight a new bill coming out of Sacramento, one of the latest pieces of legislation coming from the California legislature. It's called Senate Bill number 9. And I'll start by introducing an article, a Cal Matters article by Dan Walters entitled, "Cities Try to Thwart State's Push for Housing." Quote, "One of the state's newest pro-housing approaches, embodied in legislation enacted last year and going into effect last month, allows up to 4 units of housing to be built on land zoned for single-family homes. City officials denounced Senate Bill number 9 as it was winding through the Capitol, arguing that it's usurped their traditional land use authority and would change the character of their neighborhoods." Now, I highlight this quote specifically in this Cal Matters article because I've been seeing in a lot of the writing, and a lot of articles on this topic, a lot of the writers stating that it allows 4 units, but it clearly states in the bill that it allows 2 units, not 2 additional units, including the one that you currently have. It clearly states no more than 2 units, meaning in real estate terms, a duplex. So these are going to be duplexes that are going to be allowed on these inside of these single family residential zones. According to the article, to try and fight the new law, cities like Pasadena enacted an emergency ordinance that imposes tight and likely unworkable rules on what can be built. They include an 800 square foot limit on new units, a 1-story height limitation, a requirement for 1 parking spot for each new unit, landscaping standards, and a ban on short-term rentals. The hope is that measures such as these could make development authorized under SB 9 economically prohibitive. So the hope is that these cities who feel that their authority is being usurped by Sacramento can put these policies in place to sort of mitigate the impact of this state mandated program that's being handed down, sort of being plopped into their lap, and they have to implement some version of this thing. So they're doing what they can to wiggle through. What's interesting, this I'm not really sure if it's a city. It's a wealthy enclave in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Peninsula. This place called Woodside. What they creatively try to do is to have the mountain lions in their area declared a threatened species, claiming that the entire town should be seen as a mountain lion habitat. It's very creative. I can't see how they thought that was going to work, but they tried to pull that off. The California Attorney General quickly wrote them a letter shutting that down and invalidating that petition that was going around to make that happen. He was like, nah, that's a no-go. Good try, though. If the petition had been accepted, though, it would have made Woodside unsuitable for this housing proposal. So what's in it? What is in SB 9? The opening statement of the bill goes as follows. The planning and zoning law provides for the creation of accessory dwelling units by local ordinance, or if a local agency has not adopted an ordinance, by ministerial approval in accordance with specific standards and conditions. So ultimately, the conditions, like what was highlighted in the Cal Matters article, is up to the local agencies, local governments, and how they want to impose whatever version of this state mandated program that can fit into their current program. The bill would allow residents to have no more than 2 residential units on a single plot within a single family residential zone. The development will be subject to local government discretion and does not require a review or a public hearing. So local governments don't have to hold a hearing for this. This is just something that has to be done according to the state legislature, signed into effect by one Gavin Newsom. In other words, this bill would make it a lot easier for residents to turn their single-family residences into duplexes. However, permission to develop will require certain limitations. So these are some of the factors that will get your plans to turn your residence into that duplex stated here in the bill. It has to meet a certain level of limits and criteria. So there are a few factors that your local government will cite as reasons for not allowing you to build these duplexes. You can't build them if you live in a rent-controlled area. I know there are a few rent-controlled areas around the greater Los Angeles area, so this state-mandated program won't affect them as much as some place that hasn't experienced the reaches of rent control. You can't destroy more than 25% of the existing outside structural wall of your residence to make this extra unit. And the unit in development can't be located within a historical district, be located on the state historic resources inventory, or be located within a location that is legally listed as a city or county landmark district. So those are the factors that go into play in terms of turning your residence into one of these duplexes. Development would still have to be approved by your local government agency or entity, but the bill states that they can and can't require when their approval process begins. So again, you can see why these local agencies and governments wouldn't want this to be thrusted upon them. I mean, who knows the kind of housing planning that they were thinking of implementing for the year, a given year. Maybe they have a 5-year plan. But this, if they were doing anything ambitious in another vein, this would completely throw a wrench in that, because many people don't have stated that they don't like the way this is going to make their residences look. So we'll see how it plays out. The approval process should have fairly objective standards, and the bill stops local governments from stopping the construction units from being at least 800 square feet in floor area or imposing unfair setbacks. So just like in that Pasadena example, they limited it to exactly 800. So that's the limit, and that's on the lower end. That's the limit, and the maximum is also 800 square feet. So they made that the exact limitation for what this unit is going to look like within the city of Pasadena. So that's how you see some of these local governments are going to start playing with the rules of this legislation to make it fit. I mean, I'm sure some of them would do away with it entirely, but this is something that has to go on, like I said, if your city is not rent controlled. So who knows, maybe some of these cities are going to start playing with rent control just to avoid the imposition of this bill. That could be a way out of it. I don't know if landlords are going to be amenable to that, but let's see what happens. So unfair setbacks. A setback requirement is the minimum distance a unit must be spaced from a road, body of water, or any other area that needs protection. So you're building this unit, if it extends too close to, say, a lake or the street, it's kind of like imposing on the sidewalk some of these common spaces, it's a breach of the setback requirements for whatever local government or city is trying to approve your plans for your unit. So monitor the if this is something that you're going to develop, monitor the setback requirements for your local government. In ordinary cases, the Subdivision Map Act, which gives local governments the authority to regulate and control the design and improvement of subdivisions and provide procedures to govern their municipalities, would require that an approved map contract expire after 12 months. But under this bill, it allows for an additional 12 months, making it a tentative or conditional 24 months in total. So usually a contract to build one of these units, if this wasn't a state mandated program under this format, would expire after a year. But Sacramento is making it an additional year on top of this to allow for these units. This is their way of responding to YIMBY and adding more housing to the state. We'll see if it's a positive or a negative. SB 9 requires that the applicant sign an affidavit stating that they intend to occupy one of the housing units as their principal residence for a minimum of 3 years from the date of lot split approval. So this is interesting. So the state is letting this go ahead, but they're saying that you have to occupy one of these split units for a minimum of 3 years. So you can't just build, split a lot, and then rent it out to two people, go on and build another lot, split it, rent it out to two other families. You can't do that. So you have to live in one of the splits for a minimum of 3 years. Maybe you can go on and do it after that. Let's see if it's even still this bill is even still in effect. Maybe someone's going to come into not Washington to Sacramento as governor and just repeal this altogether. So we'll see how that goes. The only exception to that is if the applicant is a community land trust or a qualified nonprofit corporation. And a community land trust, or CLT as it's usually called, itself being a private nonprofit organization that owns land on behalf of the community itself. So if you're a CLT or a nonprofit corporation entity, the minimum 3 years rule doesn't apply to you, which, if I'm thinking about this correctly, sounds like somewhat of a disaster. Usually people on the CLT front have good intentions. They're probably going to make them more affordable. But I'm thinking of something like a BlackRock coming in and just building these units, making the community completely unaffordable, raising housing prices, building the level of comparables with each new unit that they build, displacing several people in the community. So it actually accomplishes the opposite of what they're thinking. So that may have to be, rewritten or checked. But hey, it's already in effect, so we'll see what happens. Usually projects of this kind would require an environmental impact report, subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. But in this case, CEQA does not apply to projects with the state which the state leaves up to ministerial or local level approval. So because it's state mandated and it's the implementation of this is passed on to local governments or agencies, CEQA doesn't really apply. That again seems a bit risky. Even if CEQA doesn't apply, if this is very intrusive or um, if it impedes on people's standard of living and their lives, they're going to hear from them anyways. So it doesn't matter if CEQA's, the one checking up on these things. The residents will let you know if it's a negative in their life. In the same vein, public hearings, as well as planning and regulation or development, would normally be required under the California Coastal Act of 1976, but that won't be required as well. So they're waiving a lot of things to make this go down. It seems like they really believe in this piece of legislation. So there's a certain level of confidence. Maybe they understand something that I don't. I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see. Like I said before. The most important thing is that this bill applies to all cities within the state of California due to its status as, like I said, a state mandated local program. The California Constitution usually requires a state to reimburse local agencies. So usually the state will reimburse local agencies for this kind of program, but for certain costs mandated by the state. But the SB 9 exempts the state from reimbursement because, according to Section 5 of SB 9, a local agency has the authority to levy service charges, fees, or assessments sufficient to pay for the program or level of service mandated by this act. So, I mean, is this going to raise property taxes? Is this going to raise, like what if they're leaving this up to local agencies? How is this going to be paid for? I mean, granted, I don't see them needing to dish out much cost at the local level. I mean, it seems like something only, proficient landlords are going to be able or have the funds to, improve these lots. This is especially at this time. You think about inflation, the cost of material in general. Who's going to be able to afford to flip these units and create these splits, these duplexes? So we'll see what kind of funds are going to be needed and where they're going to take these funds from. Now, I can see both sides of this argument. I mean, there's again the look and how it's going to impact certain neighborhoods. On one side, like I can sort of see how both of these emotions would run on either side. On one side, I can see the frustration of people who are concerned about what increased populations in single family residential zones would look like under this bill. You think about the parking issue. I mean, parking is already terrible. You go to any city in LA, you're trying to meet up with a friend and park somewhere to go to a certain event, or and you can't find parking anywhere. I mean, even in neighborhoods, you go to neighborhoods and people are parking in your spot where you usually park, after a long day of work, and there's nowhere to go. I know people in San Diego who are dealing with the same thing. So what does this look like in terms of population and size in these residential zones? And on the other hand, it's completely undeniable that California needs more housing right now. It's a bad situation. But like I mentioned before, to kind of cut that argument down, is who's going to be able to afford these units? What is this bill targeting? What demographic is this bill targeting? If it's the homeless population, I don't see this being something that's going to really make a dent, because how many homeless people do you know that can afford a duplex right now? Let's ask yourself that question. I mean, I can understand, and I can also understand the frustration of local government administrators, who I actually feel for the most on this, because They're being steamrolled into one of the most difficult zoning projects they've ever been forced to enact. You know, and especially at this time when there's so many other factors going on, and cities who have been sort of like handling the level of I think we got this, we finally have this. They're being slammed with this, and it's like, wow, okay, how do we go about this now? You know, will our residents even be having this? What are they going to say? I mean, I know several um, city councils that have been turned upside down with just the level of problems that have been flooding in and out of their chambers, and this is something that's going to be echoing and reverberating for years to come. It seems. Um, there's also the question of whether developers, like I mentioned, or investors will just take advantage of the new guidelines and build more unaffordable units, creating mass instances of gentrification, increasing housing prices, and allowing for more displacement. We see it too often. With just regular SFRs, people coming in, or investing groups coming in, buying these houses, flipping them, increasing the property value. So if you own houses in those areas, yes, you're benefiting. But um, if you're struggling to keep up, you will be priced out at some point. Especially if you're in an apartment complex in those areas. Your rent is going to rise to meet the demand of the area, and you're going to be out on the street in no time. If I wanted anything from this situation, this legislation, it would be that this new law doesn't further polarize the state in an already tumultuous partisan environment. I mean, however, I can't see how it won't. We look at the current political climate, and people are on edge in every at every level. That's federal, state, and local. It's seeping into every crevice of our system, and I can see how this can further push local city administrators further to the right in a reaction to the chaotic developmental process that this is going to demand. Um, and I think their residents may follow suit as their lives are, radically transformed in the years to come. For all the reasons I mentioned. It's also a certainty that investing and development entities will swoop in to build luxury duplexes that fit the rules, avoiding the scrutiny from what their overpriced units will do to the community around them. Um, and it's almost certain that their claim will be undoubtedly that they follow the rules, the guidelines to the letter, and don't deserve the criticism for a decision made by legislators in Sacramento. And in a way, they'll be right. Sacramento allowed this. This is what they're gonna. It's passed, so it's actually in effect. I'm not sure when exactly it's going to be implemented. I'm sure I'll have more on that later. But yeah, it's passed. Newsom signed it. It's ready to be rolled out. State mandated program. The biggest takeaway from my research into this was that many cities and towns in California are just simply at odds with the policies being handed down from Sacramento, and it's changing the political calculus within the state. People who I never would have thought would start aligning themselves with more right-leaning entities are finding themselves agreeing more with those not ideologies, I don't want to say, because it's not like they're fully in. It's just that they're finding that there's a lot more alignment than they thought there was, and that can change the voting calculus. That can change the the polling. That can change so much. with the wrong legislation. And again, we'll see how this plays out, but it's not looking good based on the outcry. I'm not sure many people know about this yet, but they'll start finding out slowly, and you'll start hearing more of a clamor about it. I guess the best way to look at this law that's inevitable, it's going to be in your lives sooner or later, is to imagine what the best possible outcome for this legislation will be. What is the best possible outcome? Maybe more CLTs will build than entities like BlackRock. Doubtable. And they'll sort of make these prices affordable for people to come in. Maybe they're like another option for bridge housing. When bridge housing is full, they can then make some of these maybe like bridge duplexes or something like that. There can be some kind of expansion on that. We'll see. But yeah, I don't really see so much upside for this. I see a lot of downside, but we'll see. They must see something in Sacramento that I don't see, but we'll see how that goes. So my best guess, this is my guess on what's going to go down from this legislation. And again, I don't really know. I'm making an educated guess. Maybe they have the better intentions, or they're maybe just trying to look out for real estate interests that are trying to line their pockets. But my best guess on the result of this legislation is that it won't affect the homeless situation at all, and will instead lead to a bit more housing insecurity in the long run. It has the possibility to create a housing boom in places like Bakersfield and the Inland Empire, where development costs and housing wouldn't be as expensive as the big cities like, say, in LA or San Diego or San Francisco. But also, this would undoubtedly raise the property values in those areas and cause a bit more pain to the pockets of many Californians battling with the poverty line. So we'll see. I hope that, there are a whole host and range of things that could be coming out of Sacramento at this moment that people need. And they've chosen to focus on this. So maybe they've calculated some move we haven't seen yet, some pocket need that needs to be filled. Maybe they're just placating IMBY. We shall see. That's literally my mantra for this. We shall see. So this is Kevin C. Eze, your host of the Purple Fox podcast, signing out.